Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 100 Arcane build using dual occult scythes. We'll be putting 50 points into Vigor, 27 into Endurance, and 14 into Strength and Dexterity, which are the requirements for the scythes. And then we'll also put the rest of our points into Arcane. So that's going to give us 46 points in Arcane, but with the Mask of Confidence, that boosts it to 49. As for the rest of our armor, we'll be wearing the Tree Sentinel armor, the Bullgoat gauntlets, and the Tree Sentinel greaves. That nets us 77 points, which gets us above the new kind of poise break of 75. The jump attacks on dual scythes are very strong, so we'll be using the Claw Talisman. We'll also use the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, since we are going to be dealing a decent amount of blood loss buildup. And then we'll use Great Jar's Arsenal for equip load and Crimson Amber Medallion to raise our HP. The tiers you use in your mix physic are going to be pretty flexible for this build, but I just went for HP related tiers since we are using 50 Vigor, which isn't super low, but it could be higher. So we're going to use the Crimson Burst tier, which gives us HP over time, and then the Crimson Bolt tier, which will give us HP when we're close to death. The moveset for this build is going to be very strong. It has great poise damage as well as great range and comes out very quickly. And we did see a buff in patch 1.08 to the speed of the weapon, so all those things together make the scythes very strong. So I really recommend the jumping L1 as well as the crouching L1. These are two attacks that come out very fast and involve both the scythes. The running L1 is going to be solid for roll catching since it comes out in two parts. So once you get your opponent low on health, I definitely recommend using the running L1. And then the one-handed moveset is also great. So just a running light attack is good. I like the running heavy a lot. It comes out in a very wide sweeping attack that is great for catching multiple opponents in kind of the same moment. And then it also has a very nice reverse backstep move, which involves a staggered attack, but it's not as slow as, say, like the running L1. So those things together make this moveset very strong, and I really enjoyed it. As for our Ashes of War, we're going to be boosting our jump attacks by using the Raptors of the Mist on one scythe, and then I also have Spinning Slash on the other. I also tried Phantom Slash on the offhand scythe, but found Spinning Slash to be a little bit better. But honestly, the moveset for this is so good, you don't really need Ashes of War. Because we are occult infusing these, you're not going to have access to some of the other ones like Flaming Strike or Loretta's Slash, but I found that to not really be an issue. It's also worth noting that I don't usually do Arcane builds, but it had been quite a while, and I know Scythes got a buff in patch 1.08, so yeah, I know they're not always everybody's favorite, but I just thought I'd give it a try and have some fun. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build and the moveset. If you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments, and if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I really appreciate it. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a 3v1 in the mountaintops of the Giants, and this involves one host, which is a mage user, and then two melee players. So I'm trying to kind of lead the group of three over towards the giant that's behind me, and I'm pretty familiar with this area. I've invaded here a lot, and I'm just trying to avoid the magic that's coming my way as well as get some PvE involved. I'm not exactly sure how much it's going to help since its attacks are pretty slow, but just having a little bit more chaos in the mix I feel would be useful, especially in an instance where you've got a mage host and just two melee players that can apply a lot of continuous pressure if you're just kind of hanging out in an open field. So I'm doing my best to kind of dodge the magic that's coming my way as well as get some freezing pots in the mix just to lower the opponent's damage negation and do a little damage in the process. So now we have aggroed the giant, and this is going to be useful just in terms of kind of keeping people on their toes as well as getting some damage in the mix. So you can see as soon as the one player gets hit by the PvE, I immediately start aggressing them and just try to get as much damage as quickly as possible. And you also notice that it's really effective in isolating one opponent from the two others. There's kind of a divide where one opponent was behind the giant and the other two are in front of it. So that does allow me to kind of get the jumping attack that I need, and I should have paid more attention to the other Phantom. I was kind of focusing on the player with the kind of commander's standard, and I should have been focusing on the other melee player just because they had much less HP. This player is pretty tanky, and you'll see as I kind of continue to aggress, I'm mostly trying to avoid taking damage as much as I can while just getting in chip damage here or there. I have regen on, which means that if I prolong the fight, I'm going to be in a good spot. This player also does have regen on, but I think the damage output that I'm delivering for the most part is more than theirs, so I feel like I'll be able to wear them down. And you do see that the mage started using Carrion Grandeur, which can do a ton of damage. The best thing to do is just kind of wait for it to happen and then roll. So the first time it definitely got me. I wasn't sure if they were going to go for just like the one single charge or all three. But I have, noticed a pattern here where they are mostly going for the all three charges, and that makes it much more easy to just like see them charge it and just wait. So that's definitely my recommendation in terms of how to deal with Carrion Grandeur. It can definitely one-shot you if you're not careful, but if you have time to kind of understand how your opponent is playing with it, then you'll probably be able to avoid it for the most part in future situations with that opponent. And now the mage has switched over to Moonveil, so I'm trying to keep my distance as well as just look for opportunities to get in quick attacks on the Phantom. I have switched over to my Scythe with Spinning Slash, and it doesn't have as much hyper armor as I would like it to, so running a higher poise build or just getting the kind of startup of Spinning Slash going early is going to make it a little bit more beneficial, and I see that it's not really working, so I switch back to the dual scythe moveset. One thing I did want to note there is that the player with the Commander Standard they went for their buff once, but I interrupted it with the Freezing Pot, and I think most people naturally want to go for that buff if they don't get to complete it the second time. So that's not specific to this weapon, it's with most buffs. And so I was able to punish it the second time because I was kind of predicting that it was going to be followed up by another usage of that Ash of War. So we do have the host now going for Carrion Grandeur again, but they don't have the help of their teammates to kind of cover them, so I'm able to deliver a couple final blows and win that 3v1. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one I just felt like went really pretty well. So we have somebody with 2 Bloody Helices, and for whatever reason just most of their hits didn't connect, and I think I was doing a good job of spacing and also interrupting their attacks with kind of the poise damage of the Scythes, but this invasion just kind of was one of those that felt really good in the moment. And we do see I'm able to burst their bubble tier pretty quick with some fan daggers and then go into a roll to dodge all their damage coming my way. I'm also trying to get both of them frostbitten if possible. So there we see the backswing on the jumping attack being really strong. It goes pretty far behind you and is a great way to just get partial damage from that jumping attack, and one of the reasons the jumping attack is so strong. So I've kind of got the dual Bloody Helix player backed into a corner a little bit. They do a good job, the host does a good job of kind of getting that player out of the corner, but the space is a little bit difficult to navigate in, and I definitely felt like I was kind of on the front foot throughout the course of this invasion, and then eventually I am able to stun lock both of them simultaneously, get a lot of bleed build up, and then once it's just a one-on-one, I'm able to take care of that host pretty quickly. Next up we have a 3v1, and this involves a mage as well as a host that's using melee attacks, and then a blue that gets summoned in at some point also using some melee attacks. So I start going after the mage pretty aggressively, and the host is using Sacred Blade, which is a great way to just interrupt people. It's very strong in the context of co-op because it has great range and just comes out super fast. It's also a really good Estus punish, but in the context of this invasion, they didn't spam it too much, which I was kind of happy to see. So I do need to back off a little bit here and just kind of regroup. The mage is like charging up a spell, which gives me some space and allows me to kind of isolate the blue. And I do go for a Raptors of the Mist, but that's always something you need to worry about, is if you get poise broken in kind of that initial startup jump. So attacks with longer attack animations like dual Great Spears or something are going to be really good for Raptors of the Mist. Something that has a faster recovery frame like a Nabakiba is definitely going to be something that you need to look out for, because you can't get poise broken out of the air. So the mage does go for a Dragon Breath attack, and that allows me to land a jumping attack on them. The Scythes are so good for catching opponents out of the air. They have really nice range, and just I really like the hitbox of the jumping attack. So that was just kind of a bad move on the part of the mage there to think they would have enough cover to not get kind of knocked out of the air there. So once it's just a one-on-one, I'm able to deliver a number of light attacks on the host and eventually proc bleed, and then I just kind of delay that final L or R1 because I think that I'll be able to catch them with a just kind of reaction Estus punish, and eventually they do go for their Estus, and that allows me to just deliver a light attack that does the last bit of HP. So next up we have a 2v1 that turns into a 3v1 again, and this one involves just kind of a weird layout of the terrain and using kind of the stairs as well as the roofs to just interrupt people's attacks and kind of space people in a more complicated way than just, like backing down a hallway. So I'm trying to stay pretty aggressive on the Phantom here, and I do land one jumping attack and then follow it up with a running L1, which doesn't manage to hit them at all, but I am kind of continuously staying aggressive, and fortunately the host isn't using Beast Roar too much, which means I'm not getting poise broken. And eventually I am able to kind of get the last bit of HP from the Phantom there. And here I almost get stuck, which would have been really bad because the blue comes in like rivers of blood, and getting stuck in that little area with the walls would have probably resulted in my death. But the PvE is kind of doing a good job of just interrupting things and keeping the chaos present. I'm trying to dodge the rivers of blood as well as some of the pest threads, but the host does kind of fall to the hands of the PvE, and then I go for a chase down on the blue real quick and get a crouching L1, which I just find to be really strong. I meant to kind of use it more often than I did, just because the range is very good and you get both attacks out simultaneously. So next up we have a 2v1, and this is a duo that I invaded earlier. They're using just kind of aggressive bleed weapons. So we have the Moog Spear and a Fingerprint Shield, as well as some Rot Breath, and I believe Rivers of Blood. I'm not 100% sure what the host is using off the top of my head, but we'll see in just a moment. And they also will be incorporating some of the little bleed bugs that you can use as a spell. So lots of blood loss buildup in kind of the area, and just something to be aware of, as well as a decent amount of kind of Dragon Breath spam. So I'm trying to get as much damage as I can off on the Phantom here, and I do manage to get a guard break and riposte, but the damage doesn't come through for the riposte, so I don't manage to kill them there, which was a little bit frustrating. And we do kind of begin a chase down here where I'm getting a lot of Estus punishes in, but there I'm a little bit late with my jumping attack, which means they are able to roll out. And I'm kind of in a bad spot where my blood loss meter is very high up, and my overall health is pretty low. So those things are kind of a bad combination where you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to use a blood loss bolus or a Estus, and I think the right call is to use the Estus in this kind of scenario, but it can kind of be confusing for your brain because you want to do two different things at the same time, and both of them have the potential to result in some sort of punishment. So eventually I do kind of get the blood loss meter down a little bit and get some health back, but here I go for Rapids of the Mist, and the kind of bugs come in and get that blood loss meter very high very quick, which means that I get stun locked out of Rapids of the Mist, which is pretty brutal. But eventually I do land another Rapids of the Mist attack, and this time I don't get blood loss procced in the process, and am able to guard break the Phantom there. And there, the riposte, I'm not sure, it didn't even make a noise, which was kind of weird. So I go for another parry, which might not have been the best call since the connection seemed a little bit weird given that kind of first parry attempt where it wasn't a partial parry, I didn't get hit, but there was no sound that was made in that interaction. So a little bit of an odd moment with connection, but we ended up getting another parry that was successful. So next up we have just a 2v1, and this involves a very overleveled Phantom. We'll see about over 2,000 runes come, which is not normal for level 100. So I try to kind of frost proc them early on because I think that they're over leveled, just given the weight load that they have in terms of armor and weapons, and then just stay really aggressive so they don't have too much of a chance to heal or kind of be the aggressor in the situation. So next up, we do just have a host that's fat rolling, so it's not too much of a problem, but I wanted to include this just so you can kind of see the approach when you do have an overleveled phantom that is, you know, super dangerous if you kind of let them be. So next up we have, well, it's kind of a continuous 2v1 where the host stayed alive for quite a while, and we had multiple phantoms and blues come into the world. And this is a God of War cosplay, so definitely been seeing a lot of those ever since the release, where you have dual magma curved swords as well as, you know, a beard and a bald head. So I don't actually play God of War, but, you know, if you play Elden Ring enough, you'll see its influence on the game. So this player does have the potential to deliver just a ton of damage output. So I'm definitely wary of that and trying to be the aggressor, but I do have to kind of respect the amount of damage they can do. So they haven't landed too many hits, and I think if they played more aggressively, they would have been in a better spot to just kill me pretty quickly. But they kind of make an odd decision of letting me kind of isolate the blue. So they come in occasionally, and there you can just see how much damage they can do. But then they return either to neutral or kind of defense just in general. They don't stay aggressive. So I'm not sure if they kind of wanted a one-on-one, but blues kept coming into the world or what, but this is pretty nice. It meant that I didn't have to worry too much about the host at all and could focus mostly on just the incoming blues. So they're both playing very, very passively right now, and the mage should be aggressing a little bit more than they are. We're not seeing a lot of like team play here, so you can kind of see the host in the background. I'm not sure if they were just waiting for opportunities to jump in or what, but it was kind of a strange play style. So I am able to kind of chase down the blue after landing a jumping attack, and just in time because another blue comes into the world and starts kind of playing definitely more aggressive than the first blue. So there I go for a Raptors of the Mist just because they were going for a kind of predictable jumping attack, and then they go for Flaming Strike, which I'm able to stun lock them out of. And then here I managed to land the Blood Loss proc, and then I hit the wall like 3 times in a row, just going for different attacks here. So that is something to note about the Scythe. It's kind of wide sweeping attacks are great for catching multiple opponents, but they also catch walls sometimes. So just be aware of that and kind of keep your surroundings in mind, and, you know, maybe go for like something like a crouching L1 or something that has an overhead attack rather than a sweeping kind of wide attack like a running L1. So something to keep in mind there, but it ended up working out okay in the end. We were able to get rid of that last blue, and now it's just a one-on-one again. This player is still playing kind of passively, which makes kind of chasing down not so hard. And the Magma Curve swords are very strong, but can also be pretty predictable. So the jumping L1s and the running L1s are really what I'm looking out for. And eventually they do get kind of stuck in this wall. So I have been stuck in that particular type of area where you have that little like diagonal post that is really a problem, and it's not fun. So kind of an unfortunate way to finish that invasion for that player, but they were playing pretty passively, so you know, taking any opportunity I could to chase them down felt like the right move. So next up we have the kind of bleed build-up duo again, and they were killing jellyfish, which I just, you know, it's just not really cool. So I felt like we definitely needed to do something about that. Here I do have an opportunity to get a Blood Bolus in, and just kind of negating the bleed buildup, I think, was the right play within the context of this invasion. And if you do have the time and space, it's gonna really be beneficial. So there I go for a jumping attack, and ends up being pretty helpful in terms of getting the Phantom's HP down, and then they kind of continuously aggress with the Moog Spear, and I'm able to get a Raptors of the Mist kill off that Phantom. So Scythes do really well against shields. I think there's some attribute to them that allows them to deal more damage when facing shields than like other similar weapons, so you don't need to have split damage or anything like that to get decent chip damage in the context of fighting shields. So that's definitely a nice aspect of it. and one that I kind of utilized a couple times against different shield users. So next up we have a 2v1, and we have a player using the Storm Assault, or Stormblade rather, Ash of War on dual curve swords, and that can be pretty difficult to deal with. And here they get really aggressive and just do a ton of damage all at once, but they stay a little bit too aggressive for too long, and I'm able to get just a crouching attack which does the rest of their HP and also manages to hit the host in kind of the context there. So that ends up being pretty solid, and then I just kind of have to begin the chase down. That's the one-on-one against just the single sword user. So I go for a Phantom Slash there, and that was enough to catch them, which felt pretty good for sure, and was just kind of a nice way to incorporate that Ash of War. It's nice to cover a distance. Next up we have a 2v1, and I immediately go for a Freezing Pot, which does knock the Phantom here out of their Dragon Breath, and I definitely felt like Dragon Breath was kind of the downfall of their build within this invasion. So they are using the Serpent Bone Blade, which is pretty cool. It gets that unique heavy attack that you just saw where it comes out with 2 slashes, and here they go for Dragon Breath again, and the Scythes are just so good for catching that out of the air. That, if you have the time and you're not getting poise broken by that early part of Dragon Breath, it will be really nice to just kind of grab that jumping attack if you are able to. So next up we have a 3v1, and this is in an area that I don't particularly enjoy fighting in because there's just so much potential for different types of spam. You can, use Rot Breath spam, you can use Waves of Gold, Blasphemous Blade. It's all very difficult to avoid when you're kind of in this narrow hallway with no PvE and 3 different players attacking you. So I was fortunate enough to be able to utilize Raptors of the Mist. I find Raptors of the Mist is just so strong when you have aggressive players you're trying to deal with. Just being able to avoid the incoming damage and then follow it up with an extremely damaging attack makes it very viable in lots of different situations. I think the only thing you really need to worry about is getting stun locked out of the air. So I think that's a nice aspect of how it's balanced. You can see there that Rivers of Blood does stun lock me out of the air, which was definitely not what I was hoping for. In some cases I'd been able to poise through it, but I think my just kind of base poise damage was a little bit higher. So, getting poise broken more early would have contributed to that. So next up we have a 2v1, and I kind of just come up a elevator here, and instead of trying to fight people, I want to get my mixed physic involved and just try to understand what they're doing. So I land a jumping attack that does more damage than Lion's Claw, and they just stay really aggressive. So I kind of wait for a moment there to just kind of roll their attacks and then get my Scythe attack out, which just comes out super fast. And then once it's a one-on-one with the host, I go to the elevator and just send it down so they don't really have an escape route. I feel like that's going to be useful in the context of this particular invasion. And then I manage to get a couple quick hits in and then go for Raptors of the Mist when I think they're going to attack me. And just the range on that jumping attack is so solid. I find that I like to use Raptors of the Mist on a lot of dual-wielded weapons, but the ones with range and poise damage are the ones that just really shine. So next up we have a 2v1, and I do manage to get some early kind of L1s in that hit both players at the same time. Honestly, the kind of range and sweeping motion that comes with those L1s make the successive attack talismans and mixed physics pretty good option for this type of build. So it's not what I ran on this build, but I would love to try that, I think, in the future, just using this more of as a successive attack type build rather than a jumping attack type build, because you really get a lot of damage buff when you are able to hit multiple opponents at the same time with that setup. So eventually I do get the first Phantom down and then manage to kind of clip the player with the mace out of the air and then just kind of follow it up with 2 quick attacks. So the just single Scythe does prove to be pretty strong and was a nice way to get a couple quick hits in with some roll catching involved when it was just a one-on-one. So next up we have a 2v1, and this is going to be one where I definitely struggled a little bit more than I wanted to with the different builds that I was facing. So we have a fingerprint shield and a mace, which you just don't see too often. The mace is more frequently used two-handed, and the fingerprint shield is kind of an odd mix to that. So I go for Phantom Slash, and I go for both parts of it, which means that I'm able to get a decent amount of continuous chip damage on the fingerprint shield, and then once they go down, I have just a one-on-one with the host, which isn't too bad. And here I think they meant to heal, but ended up using their FP flask, so that ended up working out pretty well, and I was able to land a quick attack with not too much trouble. So next up we have a 2v1, and I'm not sure if there's too much to learn from this other than this is like one of the most latent fights I've ever experienced. So we have a host and a phantom. The host has a fine connection with me, but the phantom has kind of one of those weird connections where all of their attacks seem to land at the right time, but all of my attacks are delayed significantly, so it's not kind of a balanced latency where both of our attacks are delayed. It's just mine, and this makes things pretty difficult to deal with because you're not able to poise break your opponent because the damage comes so late, but it is also weird for them to play against because they don't really know when damage is going to come their way. So I'm kind of just using these narrow hallways as ways to like funnel my opponents into some of my more wide sweeping attacks. So there you can see I went for Spinning Slash in the hallway, which is definitely a type of move that I recommend. And here I start panic rolling a little bit and get roll caught on the Impaling Thrust Ash of War, but I kind of get the timing down, and there I landed a jumping attack but don't see that damage come for quite a while. And then here I go for a backstab, and this is definitely the most latent backstab I've ever gotten. So you saw the beginning of that animation, and then like a full 5 or 6 seconds later we kind of get the connection to it. So I'm not sure if it was just because I was in proximity to their back that happened, or if I would have just teleported to right behind them if you know, I hadn't been so close to them. But I've never really seen a backstab happen like that, and it was just kind of a funny moment within the context of this invasion. So this was like not exactly like the right way to play, and I'm not sure if it would have gone on this long had they had a better connection, but eventually I am finally able to get a little bit more damage and switch over to just the two-handed moveset, grab some Spinning Slash attacks, and then follow it up with some light attacks. And once it's just a one-on-one, it wasn't really an issue. That player didn't have a ton of health, and their build wasn't super optimized to be like poise breaking me later or regularly or anything like that. So I end up coming out with the W there, but I mostly kept that because that backstab is just like one of the most ridiculous connection-based issues I've ever seen. So next up we have a 2v1, and this involves some kind of interesting builds. We have a Great Shield as well as a Giant Crusher on a very low poise build, so I try to use that pillar there as kind of a way to shield myself from anything that might be incoming, and it does block the player going for a jumping attack. And then I'm able to land a jumping attack on my end, which does the last bit of their HP. And then, now that it's a one-on-one, I do switch over to the Phantom Slash moveset, and I do land kind of all 3 hits from that second part of the animation. So Phantom Slash can definitely be a really useful Ash of War, but it does have kind of specific moments that it's good for. So next up we have a 3v1, and this one was just kind of a silly invasion that I enjoyed. So we have some pressure coming from one Phantom, but I was pretty confident I'd be able to get a kill with the Jar Cannon, so I managed to shoot the wall twice and just kind of knock that player with the Radon Helm off the edge of that pipe, and then kind of reset, get rid of the poison damage or buildup that I've received from this player that's hanging out with their bow up top on that pipe up there. And then eventually I do manage to knock them down. I was expecting them to fall to their death, but they do just fall down onto the lower pipe, which means that I feel like I need to kind of go after them here. So I land one hit there. They have a little bit more range than I'm expecting with the Ripple Crescent Halberd, but I'm able to kind of reset back to neutral and just kind of determine if I need to heal or be more aggressive. And in that process, the host does manage to use Bloodhound Fang off the edge of the pipe and fall to their death. So we did get all 3, 2 of them fell to their death, and it was just kind of a fun invasion with the Jar Cannon, as well as the just kind of odd play from both the host and the person with the Mushroom Crown. So next up we have a pretty drawn out invasion, and I was fairly happy with how most of this went. I am in a spot where there's some PvE that hasn't been aggroed behind me at the bottom of those stairs, and I'm using that definitely to my advantage, where I know that they don't want to go down there because they don't want to aggro that watchdog, and that means that I can just kind of go down there anytime I need some space and they won't follow me, which allows me to, get in quick heals, or just, whenever I feel like there's a lot of pressure, I can use that to my advantage. So there I back off a little bit and manage to get a heal in, and I land a jumping attack that does 1,000 damage with the blood loss buildup, but it's not quite enough to finish off this dual spear player. Playing against dual spears as well as a halberd is kind of a rough pairing of weapons to play against. One of them is Vike Spear, so I think they definitely could have done a lot of madness buildup if they had been using it a little bit more effectively, or if I had been, dodging a little bit more poorly. And that would have probably been the end of me if I had gotten full madness buildup. So there you can see I kind of reset back to neutral, go back down by the watchdog cat thing, and just managed to get a heal in and come back in and start being aggressive again. So I definitely took a decent amount of damage within this context, but they also did. So I'm not sure if all the trades were beneficial, but I did have enough trades to kind of wear them down. And then here you can see a blue comes in, and this means that the watchdog has now been aggroed, and everything just kind of starts becoming chaotic. And that's kind of exactly what I was hoping for. So they've gained a teammate, but in some ways I have as well, and this is just a nice opportunity to kind of get some damage that I don't have to deliver or trade for. Obviously that PvE can damage me as well, but I find that kind of the amount of time it takes to kill that thing and just kind of the random jumping attacks that it delivers are very difficult to deal with, especially if you have somebody also invading you. So I've been trying to kind of get frost procs in periodically, and just make sure that when I do deliver like a jumping attack or something, I'll be able to get a decent amount of their HP down. And then here I want to go for the player with the dual spears, because I know that they have been losing a lot of health in the process of fighting me, and then have also lost some health in the process of fighting the watchdog there. So eventually I am finally able to land a running light attack with the second follow-up attack, delivering the final blow against that dual spears player, and now I feel like I'm in a great spot. It's just a 2v2 again, but this blue is not as strong as that dual spear player, and I'm able to just kind of chase them down real quick. So I'll take this moment just to talk about this build in general. The moveset is really strong, and using something with a lot of range and poise damage is going to be great. I'm not sure if Scythes are going to be meta now. I know G9 has put out some videos about them in the past and more recently, so we may see them more often, but I really enjoyed it, and it was a nice change of pace to use something that was very solid. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support, and if you do have any build suggestions for the future, definitely let me know below. I'll be happy to check that out, and I do have a running list of builds I'm looking to incorporate. So yeah, that's all I've got, and I hope you have a good one.